Well, on this channel, as you well know, we like to travel to new places and explore bits of history from all over. And right now, I am in a place that I have never visited before, but have wanted to come to for a long time. We are in Scotland, in the city of Edinburgh. We got a lot of things that we're going to be doing on this trip. But first, we're going to start off our tour through Scotland at the Castle of Edinburgh. All right, we just walked through the gatehouse here at Edinburgh Castle, and I'm going to tell you, there are about 1 billion people here today. It is super crowded. So we're going to kind of do our best as we go through this complex. Again, I don't really know much about this castle. I didn't have a whole lot of opportunity to do research ahead of time. But we're going to kind of just learn as we go, and anything that looks interesting to me, I'll point out. But kind of think of this as more as like a sampler platter of the castle rather than a full walkthrough. All right, now when I said that there were a bunch of people here today, I was not kidding. There was just like a huge stream of people who just walked through this gate. So this is called the Porticulus Gate. It was built from the region of 1574 to 1577, and on the sign here it says that it was built after the long siege of 1871 to 73 and acted as a main gateway into the castle. So it stands here on the site of what had been the medieval Constable's Tower and then was added on to in the 1880s. One of the first things that you see here at the castle is something called the 1 o'clock gun. This is a big attraction here. And the 1 o'clock gun was a gun that was positioned here on the castle grounds. And every day at exactly 1 o'clock, it would go off so that people could calibrate their clocks and watches. This became a very important thing during the Industrial Revolution because, well, you got to get people to the factories on time, so everybody needs to have their watches calibrated. You also have to think about trains. If trains aren't operating on exactly the same schedule, well, then there's the opportunity for train collisions to take place. Each town, prior to standardized time, the way that they would have their local time set up is when the sun was directly overhead, that was noon. Well, if you have towns that are 60 miles away, the sun's not directly overhead at the same time. So that was causing some confusion. We are currently just walking the outer perimeter of the castle grounds here. And when you stand on Castle Rock, which is the name of the place where this castle stands, it kind of makes sense as to why people, even all the way back to ancient times, would find this as an attractive place. If you look out in the distance, this body of water in front of us is called the Firth of Forth. And if we were to hop in there and follow it out in this direction, well, that would take us to the North Sea. So having this high ground here has some strategic benefits. And there have been all kinds of Scottish royals who have lived here. Malcolm III, all the way back in the 11th century, began a royal residence here. And again, there have been numbers of Scottish royals who have made their home right here over the years. All right, we've now moved to the upper part of the fort, and we are at a place called the Fourwall Battery. And it says here in 1544 It was rebuilt by King James V. The guns that we are seeing were made about 1810. And hopefully you can't hear the angry family that is yelling at each other behind me. But if we look through here, well, this is a look out of this loophole. So this is defending an attack from any enemy who would be coming from this area. You can see the Firth of Forth out there in the distance. All right, so this area that we are walking up on is called Half Moon Battery, and you can see where it gets its name. So it says here that this artillery fortification was built after the long siege of 1571 to 73. Had a little bit of a Lisdexic moment there. Anyway, that was to protect the royal palace from bombardment. And something called David's Tower, which was the residence of Robert the Bruce's son, David II, is actually buried beneath this platform. All right, so I'm kind of in the center of the complex here. And one of the things that I really wanted to see here at the castle complex was the Scottish War Memorial, which is right here behind me. This is a memorial that honors the Scotsmen who fought and died in the First World War. Unfortunately, you can't film or take any photographs in there, so I'm going to honor that. Back here, well, inside this door, behind this giant crowd, is where they have the Scottish crown jewels. But here's the deal. I'm not getting in that line, and I'm not going to fight that crowd. It is insane here today. Got a few other things I'm going to try and show here, though. All right, now we may not be able to see the crown jewels, but we can maybe see the Great Hall. So here on the sign, it says that this is from 1503 to 1513. Was built for King James IV as a setting for ceremonial occasions, and then was converted into soldiers' barracks in 1650 by Oliver Cromwell. All right, we're gonna dodge inside here real quick and just take a peek. Holy smokes. Well, this place is nice. So to my understanding, they use this today for different like official functions and ceremonies and things like that. So here you can see all kinds of different weapons and armor lined here in the Great Hall. It's a little bit dark up there on the roof, but up above, just saw a sign that said there's some carvings up there. Man, there's so many people that it's hard to even be able to stop and like read any information just because there's a giant crowd gathered around everything. But yeah, at least we can get up here and see this cool looking fireplace. Okay, we've walked a little bit of the perimeter now, and we're getting ready to go inside and take a look at the museum here. And gotta admit, getting pretty dang thirsty. So if you're up here on this this high ground, well, what do you do for water in the 1600s? Well, this is called the Backwell. It says here this was built in 1628. It's only 3 meters deep. Probably not really a well, probably more of a cistern. So any water that was draining off of the rock would be collected in this cistern right here to address any water shortage problems here on the castle grounds. All right, we just got into the museum, which is titled A Nation at Arms. So I'm assuming that we are going to be looking at some things connected to the military history of Britain. And good Lord Almighty, there are people everywhere in here. So we're going to do our best. So take a look at the thing. I just bumped into somebody here. I'm telling you, it is packed. All right, so here we see what's called a lobster tail helmet that would have been worn around the 17th century by mounted troops. Also, oh, cool. Yeah, I got an old wheel lock pistol right here. Yeah, very interesting. Now, in the early 1300s, Scotland had gained its independence from England. Okay, so if you think like William Wallace, Robert the Bruce, okay, that era right there. But in 1707, well, there was an alliance that was formed between Scotland and England. Other European nations were becoming more powerful, and some of these others, like Scotland and England, started to realize that they needed to have each other in order to maintain collective security. So again, in 1707, England and Scotland are going to form an alliance where Scotland gets access to England's wealth and power, and England gains a little bit more military security with the two nations sharing an island. Now, one guy who is going to be fighting later on in this union is a general by the name of Sir Ralph Abberrombi. He is going to fight in the Napoleonic Wars. As a matter of fact, when the British fight against the French in Egypt, they're going to have a series of defeats, but will ultimately be successful in removing the French and protecting their colonial interests in India. But that conflict is going to cost Ralph Abberrombi his life. He was from, it says here, Clackmannan, which is in central Scotland. And here are a few items that belonged to Abberrombi. Here's a watch, an eyeglass, got some silver drinking cups, and yeah, was actually wearing the watch when he was wounded, mortally wounded, at the Battle of Alexandria in 1801. Now here's something that is just pretty dang cool. One of the people who was born in Edinburgh was Sir Douglas Heg. So Sir Douglas Heg was the commander-in-chief of the British Expeditionary Force in the First World War, took over from John French, and was commander-in-chief during some of the biggest engagements that the British were involved in, like the Battle of the Somme. So here we're looking at a tunic that was worn by Douglas Heg during his time in the First World War. That's just pretty cool. Down here we also see this little silver casket that was given to him as a gift from the city of Manchester after the war. And then this is a death mask of Douglas Heg. He was given a state funeral at Westminster Abbey, and then his body was eventually taken to Dryborough Abbey near where his home was. But anyway, yeah, he died in 1928. So yeah, another one of Scotland's own was Sir Douglas Heg. Here's an interesting artifact from the Second World War. This is the Scottish Royal Standard that was flown by a New Zealand infantry unit during the German invasion of Crete in 1941. It says here that to show their Scottish descent, this infantry company from Otago, New Zealand, flew the ancient royal standard of Scotland. The flag was picked up by a Greek soldier, and it was in a place where the 23rd Battalion of the New Zealand Expeditionary Force had been involved in some heavy fighting, and I guess they dropped this or lost it. But then it was handed back over to British military authorities when Crete was liberated in 1945. Yeah, pretty cool. All right, we are moving into the weapons section of the museum, and here we're looking at a selection of Highland broadswords. So the broadswords were used by warriors in the Highlands way before they became part of the British Army. So you can think, like William Wallace, Robert the Bruce, stuff like that. Okay, they would have used weapons like this, but with a broadsword, you can kind of reach out at a distance in hand-to-hand combat, but if somebody gets in really close, it might be difficult to wield that broadsword effectively, and that's where something like this would come in. This is called a Highland Derk, and as you can see, it's a short-bladed stabbing weapon. So if your opponent gets a little bit too close to you, well, you can use this. So people who were in combat in the 17th century and things like that, well, they would hold one of these in their left hand, have a broadsword in their right, and then they could be prepared for any situation in hand-to-hand combat. Here we see an example of a uniform that would have been worn by a Scotsman who served in the 2nd Battalion of the Queen's Own Cameron Highlanders during the Second World War. And as you can see, it's kind of this khaki color, kind of this dirty brown color that helps to blend in with the surroundings. Well, over here, well, this is an experimental uniform that was issued in 1885 for British troops overseas. And prior to this, the British would wear red coats. Well, red doesn't really blend in with the surrounding terrain. There's a few places that I can think of that are red, but I can think of a lot of places that are brown and green and dark colored. So soldiers who had been in active service in India 30 years before had started taking their white summer uniforms and like putting them in, mixing them with different dyes and things like that to where they're not white, to where they don't stand out. And the word they used for the color was khaki, which is a Hindi word for dust. Yeah, very interesting. Now here's something that's kind of interesting. Apologies, it's dark in here, so the lighting is not the best. But this is a jacket that would have been worn by Captain D.G. Gardner of the Royal Army Medical Corps during the First World War. The horseshoe badge that you see sewn onto the back is the insignia for the 25th Division. What's kind of interesting about this to me is I don't think I've ever seen a division insignia sewn on the back like that before. Usually it's on the shoulder. But this was to help distinguish between different units and between friendly troops and enemy, and things like that. Yeah, that's kind of interesting. All right, we just popped out of the military museum here at the Castle Complex. We've got old Douglas Heg back here behind us, and good Lord Almighty, that was a lot of people in there. So much so that I didn't even film a fraction of what they have in the museum, mostly because I couldn't even get to it myself. It was just highly, highly congested. So I'm gonna go ahead and freely admit that this probably isn't going to be the most polished episode that I've ever released on that channel. But anyway, hopefully you saw a few things that you found interesting. We're gonna see a few other things here in the city, and then we're going to be moving north into the Highlands to look at some of the history up there.